Welcome back to the Tracy Take. I am Tyler here with my brother Ryan. Today we are doing the Minnesota Vikings 2024 offseason recap. We're going to break down all the departures, acquisitions, kind of review their draft picks as well. And at the end of the video, we're going to be going over their 2024 schedule and giving our record prediction for the Vikings this season. So be sure to stay tuned all the way to the end. But before we do that, if you have not already, go ahead, like this video, subscribe to the Tracy Take, and also ring that bell to get notified whenever new content is created. We have videos coming out Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern, and we're in the middle of our offseason recap series, and so we have a new video coming out every evening, so be sure to ring that bell. And so, Brian, let's get on to this offseason recap. This is absolutely something Vikings fans want, is a Falcons fan going over all the people that left their organization in the offseason and talking about like what the new situation is going to be like. But let's quickly recap the stats here. The stats are kind of lopsided in my opinion, just because it's like fifth in passing. You go look at that. I mean, they did have some good games post Kirk Cousins injury, yes, but a lot of those stats, Kirk Cousins had some games before that. Oh, I'm on the wrong one here. Let me pull this. Okay, that makes more sense here. So so he got hurt in on the Green Bay
Week
game
5.
on October 29th. And so Kirk Cousins had multiple 300-yard games. I think he had almost a couple 400-yard passing games. And then after that, there's a serious dip with Josh Dobbs, Kellen Mond playing quarterback as well. There's another guy too. I'm blanking on here.
Nick Mullins.
Nick Mullins, Jaron Hall also played as well. So Jaron Hall is who I was thinking of, not Kellen Mond. Kellen Mond had already been gone by then. But so those stats were kind of inflated, and that's what was really disappointing, obviously, in Vikings fans. Don't need to be told this again, but I'll say it for everybody who's not Vikings fans. But Kirk Cousins really, I think, did show kind of how great of a leader he was and quarterback he was, just because nobody was giving this Vikings team a shot. And they were on an absolute roll, unfortunately, right before that injury, especially too, the way he was performing, the way he was conducting that offense. I'm really looking forward to seeing him play in the Falcons uniform. But that being said, though, I think another thing as well, though, too, one thing that is pretty consistent, and I think that's actually huge props to their defensive coordinator, Brian Flores, last year. Look at these defensive stats as well. This is not a good defensive roster. Like, you just look at it on the paper, in my opinion, like, there wasn't really too much outside of Danielle Hunter that I can really think of off the top of my head. Like, these guys are mid at best. Like they're trying to fill out a roster here. But Brian Flores had essentially like a kamikaze style attack on to the defensive approach for offenses. And they led the league in blitz percentages. I think over half the plays they blitzed on. And it was like, we can't guard you in like a normal sense. So it's like, you got to get rid of the ball really quickly because we're just going to throw all these bodies at you.
It was, you're going to beat us in 2.5 seconds, or we're going to beat you in less than that. Like, that was kind of the philosophy.
Honestly, yeah, like it kind of was. Let me go and pull this up here. So yeah, blitz percentages as well. Minnesota Vikings led the league with 51.5% for blitzes, and that's according to Pro Football Reference here as well. They were third in quarterback hurries with 64, and then as you can see, then here only 19th in sacks from the defense side, but. Really, a lot of that was just because of how aggressive they were. And frankly, I'm all for it. I love that idea. It's because their best weapon was when Kirk Cousins was healthy. Like, let's get into a shootout because we had the best receiver in the league in Justin Jefferson. Like, all right, yeah, let's get into a shootout. Like, you're going to score quickly, like you said, which means we're going to get the ball back. So it was unique to see this Minnesota Vikings team. They had a very unique 2023 season. I'm going to be very curious on how they end up playing in 2024 here. Kind of when we get to the departures and acquisitions in a second. But I've been talking a lot. I want to throw it over to you. What were your kind of overall thoughts on the Vikings kind of heading into the 2024 offseason, some of the areas that they needed to address?
Yeah, so I looked at the offense, and I wanted to give big props to Kevin O'Connell. Having this be the 10th ranked offense, especially when your running game is almost non-existent. They were not a good running team. And to rely so much on passing the ball when you had Josh Dobbs, Nick Mullins, Jaron Hall, like those guys operating this offense, I think that is a big feat that is a little understated because usually these offenses fall off a cliff. But that to me, I think that offensive line getting some more guys in there, being a better run blocking team and getting more push. Christian Darrisaw is a good left tackle, and actually like not great, but 47 sacks isn't horrible. Like, you definitely want to see that improved, but not a bad offensive line, especially when you have 4 or 5 different quarterbacks calling shots, guys that aren't getting the ball out quickly.
Well, and to put those two numbers in perspective as well, so sacks allowed and turnovers.
Yeah,
So Kirk Cousins only had 5 interceptions on the season.
yeah,
Amongst Josh Dobbs, Nick Mullins, and Jaron Hall, they had 14 amongst them.
yeah.
And then when it came to
It,
sacks, Kirk Cousins did get sacked 17 times, but then those guys then got sacked in essentially the same amount of games because Kirk Cousins played in 8 games or 7.5, I
30,
guess. Yeah, they had 20. They got sacked 29 times. So
29.
that's where some of these numbers were lopsided, but I think that's kind of goes back to when you have that franchise quarterback and he's able to conduct the offense a lot more efficiently than these backup are. That's why they're backups.
Yeah, and so I think that was really impressive by Kevin O'Connell to keep this offense still performing well, despite even like Justin Jefferson got hurt, Jordan Addison missed time. So I just think that was really impressive. And going into this offseason, they didn't have a lot of capital. They didn't have a lot of cap space to go out and sign guys. They didn't have a lot of draft capital either to really go out and target players. So I just think they were kind of in a bind, and this, not to like give my hand away for this video, but like they didn't really improve last year, and they also lost a franchise quarterback. I think that's a good segue into some of the departures. So the two big ones, Kirk Cousins, Danielle Hunter, that is your leader and your most productive player on both sides of the ball that are no longer with your team.
Yeah, yeah. Danielle Hunter, we've already talked about Kirk Cousins. I don't really think there's too much more to add. I don't know if Vikings fans want to hear more about my opinions on Kirk Cousins. But with Danielle Hunter, 16.5 sacks. And I think, too, if I'm not mistaken, let me pull up his stats here. I think he tore his Achilles or his ACL in one season where he only played 6 games, 7 games.
Yeah.
And outside of that, of his rookie year, he had one other year out of this, but he's had at least 10.5 sacks every single year. He had a down season in 2017 where he only had 7, but 2016, 12.5, 14.5, 14.5, and 18 and 19, 10.5 last year, 16.5 this year. And I think a lot of that then, too, as well, props to Brian Flores for just that kamikaze style approach to blitzing. I think gave a lot more one-on-one opportunities for Danielle Hunter, which played into their benefit. So losing a guy like that, I think, is going to be hard. Looking at it, though, what we'll get to on the next slide, I think they did add those numbers back with some of the people that they signed in the offseason. But we'll get that here in a second. I think another small one that actually is going to be interesting to see move on, and you'll like this one because he's on your team now, but I think losing KJ Osborne, he was a solid number 3, I think, for that team. And so his numbers are easily replaceable, but he had a good career in Minnesota. He had a couple of great games. I was a couple of good seasons, I would say, because anybody can have a couple of great games. But I think just that consistent guy. But when you're moving on from your franchise quarterback, you're going to want to bring somebody else in. So I get why they want to move on from him. And so DJ Woonham as well, going back to the Edwards side, he was number 2 on their sacks list. He had 8 last year as well.
Yeah. And so that to me, KJ Osborne did play a decent role in when Justin Jefferson or Jordan Addison were out. He did step up and fill in a bigger role fairly well on occasion. So I think that is still a little bit of a loss there. A few guys that are still free agents. We have Cam Akers, Sheldon Day, Anthony Barr, Chris Reed, and Nick Vigil. Some of these, like Cam Akers, he tore his Achilles his second year in the NFL and clearly has lost a step. Like I think Anthony Barr is just kind of aged out at this point. And so guys that probably will not be on rosters come training camp. So overall, a few big losses here, I think, for them. They did somewhat replace them. The two ways I think they did replace them, Sam Darnold and JJ McCarthy combined, I think, are expected to take over the starting quarterback duties. I don't know if Sam Darnold is expected to start week 1 and then JJ McCarthy take over in weeks like in later weeks, or if JJ McCarthy is just going to start and Sam Darnold's going to kind of be that mentor. But that is the future of this Vikings quarterback room for the next probably 2 or 3 seasons, unless it just goes disastrously bad, which we're not hoping for. And then Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel, both of those guys come over. Jonathan Grenard had 12 and a half sacks with Houston last year. Andrew Van Ginkel stepped up in a big way for Miami last year, especially since they lost their 2 starting edge rushers. So I think both of those guys are going to come in and try to replace 16 and a half sacks together. One thing I do want to touch on is, we'll notice this when we get more into the defensive depth charts. They have switched. Danielle Hunter is a traditional defensive end, hand in the dirt, right? He's 270, 280 plus, whereas these guys are more outside linebackers, and they're going to get more favorable one-on-one matchups with tackles as the season goes on. They'll probably line up outside the tackles, potentially in like a wide 9 on true pass rushing sets. That's a mouthful. And so I think it is interesting just to kind of see not just the strategy shift by Brian Flores, because they did blitz 51% of the time last year, but then also like to apply that strategy through personnel signings, I think is really interesting.
Yeah. It's gonna be similar too, because like you move on from your franchise, from both franchise guys. And honestly, an offensive guy, defensive side, and so then you're bringing in new guys as well. Just how does that mesh? How does the overall defensive transformation? How long does that take? Does it click instantly, or will it take a season? And I think that's going to be it. Normally, at least, Brian Flores has been there for a year. A lot of times when there's new defensive coordinators come in and they want to make this big change, there's personnel guys that are there on contract that are built more for a 4-3 instead of a 3-4. And so that will be interesting to see kind of this Vikings team and how that develops overall on the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, offensively, it's going to be very fascinating just to see the quarterback situation. That in and of itself is just going to be interesting to watch and see how that develops. But defensively, though, that's going to be another big thing. And I think that's a great year. This is going to be a great year to make that change so you can start building next. I feel like Brian Flores is going to be there at least for another year after this, just because this probably isn't going to be the best year for the Vikings. I like Kevin O'Connell as a coach. I think he's proven himself to be one of the better coaches because he's taken some Vikings teams that shouldn't be very good at all, and I think really helped kind of work with him and Kirk Cousins also then too with his QB mind. Going to be great development coach as well for JJ McCarthy. So I think kind of with the guys that they lost and then kind of who they're bringing in, I think this is going to be a good rebuilding year for them. There's still some potential, but probably not. They'll probably finish last in the NFC North, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But also, to be fair to the Vikings, a lot of the teams, 3 of the 4 teams in the NFC North are potential playoff teams. So it's going to be just a tough schedule for them anyways. But it's going to be fascinating to see just kind of how this defense shapes up here. Offensively, I think it's going to be interesting on looking at their depth chart now, if that's something that we want to move on to here, is just how.
One acquisition we forgot to mention that will help out with the loss of Danielle Hunter is Dallas Turner, the second first-round pick that they had. Sorry, I forgot to mention him in the in that. But again, also still that outside linebacker type.
That's true. That's fair. And so we'll touch on that here in a second. But I think the biggest thing, obviously, is going to be biggest storyline for their Vikings depth chart and their overall development is going to be just the quarterback position. So on this channel, if you watch the channel a lot, I'm definitely more of the opinion of like trial by fire. Put the rookie quarterback out there and like let him learn. I think that's going to be the best way to have this experience. But if they're if they have the right tools there to go and be developed, if there still needs to be some more developmental training that needs to be done, and we've seen quarterbacks like this in the past, they get initially their intention is for them to sit. Justin Herbert's initial intention was for him to sit behind, I'm pretty sure it was Tyrod Taylor, but the second game of the season, the doc accidentally punctures Tyrod Taylor's lungs and like, hey, Justin, you're in. And then like nobody looked back at all. So it's like, but that was going to be the initial plan. And Herbert was taken 7th, I think, 7th or 8th.
5th. It was Burrow 1, and then Tua was 4, and then Herbert was 5. I
Oh, okay.
believe.
All right. Either way, though, but still, just let them go and sit. And I think in some instances that makes sense, especially to the mo with McCarthy is just like what are some of his capabilities because we haven't seen nearly as much of him, just because Michigan's running game was so good. So that'll be very interesting to see. But at the same time, though, too, if it's a dead heat between him and Sam Darnold, throw JJ McCarthy out there. Who cares? Like he's going to have to learn eventually. It's you're going to be the underdog probably in a lot of games, in my opinion. So why not just put the kid out there and just see what he's got?
Yeah, yeah, and that. So I'm a proponent of that strategy if you have the supporting cast. So, like for example, New England. There's a lot of questions about the quality of the offensive line play and the quality of the receivers in New England. So if you don't have at least one of those two things, I think you need to be a lot more cautious with your rookie quarterback. Now, Minnesota has probably the best wide receiver in football with Justin Jefferson. They have a great number 2 wide receiver in Jordan Addison, who really would be a number 1, I think, on a lot of other teams. And so this offensive line, while yes, not great, I still think that they could get by, especially since the fact that they have such elite receiver talent. So I agree with you in this case. Put him out there, see what he can do. Yes, this offense might struggle a little bit early on, but I think as he grows and develops and gets more playing time, they'll be able to kind of expand this playbook and move forward from there. So it's
I
just
will say, I think one thing that also helps him out a lot that a lot of teams don't have because it's kind of hard to have a running back like Aaron Jones, who is that
yeah.
3-down guy. He is older. I think he's 29, so he is older. So has dealt with some injuries over the past couple years. Like last year, he didn't actually play too much dealing with a hamstring injury. But having a running back that is as versatile as him that can catch the ball out of the backfield, also too is a good pass blocker as well. So he'll know his assignments and can help out a lot when it comes to giving JJ McCarthy protection. I think that's going to help out a lot. Comparative to if you have a year 1 or year 2 running back who is still kind of maybe learning the developments and maybe also still learning how to just develop the skill and catching the ball out of the backfield. I think it opens things up and can be a lot. It can help kind of being that player that he can lean on. If guys aren't open or if he just feels uncomfortable, he can dump the ball off real quickly without getting hit.
Yeah, no, I agree. And so that, like, I think this offense, especially you have Kevin O'Connell coaching it, I think that they will be it'd be very well put together. Kevin O'Connell should do a good job of putting JJ McCarthy in scenarios where he will be successful and not push the envelope on really asking him to do too much too early. So I like the fit. Let's move on to the defense here really quick. Again, so I mentioned this earlier. I think they have 2 outside linebackers listed: Jonathan Grenard, Andrew Van Ginkel, Dallas Turner slotted in a little behind Andrew Van Ginkel as well. But they have the nose tackle Harrison Phillips that they brought in from Buffalo. I think was that this year or a few seasons ago.
A few seasons ago. Yeah.
A few seasons ago. Okay, so they have the nose tackle. They have their defensive tackles. So they're transitioning from a 4-3 with 4 down linemen to a 3-4, probably with 3 down linemen and some outside linebackers. Again, I think this package, with how aggressive that they were in 2023, just allows them to bring blitzes more and get guys there quicker. They're going to be a little smaller, a little bit lighter, but it's a give and take on that front 7. So I think it's a really interesting move. You look at the linebacking group or the inside linebackers, you have Blake Cashman and then Ivan Pace Jr. And then this secondary, to me, I think is where things start to get a little bit sketchy. So you have Byron Murphy, who is 30 now, if not older. Harrison Smith, who is definitely over 30. Cam Bynum, Shaq Griffin, Josh Metellus. And that's your starting secondary. So definitely going to be wanting to get after the passer with that front 7 a lot. I do think that they have some playmaking ability there. They got Mekhi Blackman last year. They drafted another guy this year.
Well, and this is where I think kind of going to the 3-4 is going to help them out. is I think they can maybe disguise their blitzes a lot more. If they were going to blitz over
Yeah.
half the time, I think they can disguise their blitzes a little bit more and have a little bit more athletic guys that can maybe drop back into coverage. Like if you line up Jonathan Grenard, on the line standing up, but actually dropping back into coverage if it's his own play. Just thinking outside the box. He's going to be a little more athletic, able to do that than Daniil Hunter is. But in general, though, I think to me, I agree with you. Just on paper, this starting lineup doesn't really jump out at you. Guys can go and develop. We can absolutely be wrong on this, even though we're rarely ever wrong on this show. I think a lot of this is going to be coming from this success is going to come from Brian Flores' mentality of like, okay, you have 5 linemen, like we're going to be rushing 6. It's like you better figure out who you're going to cover, and you got to get rid of that ball quickly. So just provide maximum pressure. But I will say, though, I'm curious if that's going to be the philosophy, because that was with Kirk Cousins, if they're maybe going to take a little bit more different approach, just so they don't want to go into a track meet just because Sam Darnold and J.J. McCarthy is going to be their quarterback. And you're not going to want them throwing 35 times a game. So I'll be curious to kind of see what their overall philosophy is when it comes to defensively, but also how the defense helps the offense and like vice versa, just because it's brand new. It seems like a whole brand new team outside of a couple of players, other superstars like Justin Jefferson. So I think. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to rebuttal really quick. I agree, especially early on, maybe that they don't try to turn things into a track meet. But I do think that this offense, you have Aaron Jones, you have Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison. I do think they're going to want to air the ball out a lot. And I think we will see J.J. McCarthy will see a much different version of offensive football than what he saw in college. And I also think like Kevin O'Connell, even with Nick Mullins, was throwing it 40 times a game. And so I think McCarthy will be asked to throw the ball a lot more. But I agree in the beginning, I think maybe like, hey, let's not try to win 42-38. Like let's try to keep this like a 27-24 game.
Let's
maybe
win. Yeah, let's just win.
Let's just figure out a way to win. So
but I will say too, kind of when it comes to that though, they're going to have a good first game to maybe not go into a track meet as well. Because going to New York Giants, they're going to have their question marks on the offensive side of the ball as well. They have a good defense. So I think that I'm going to guess it's going to be a low-scoring game. However, I will say these next 4 games are going to be very tough. Hosting San Francisco, hosting Houston, at Green Bay, and then flying to London to play Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. And so the Jets, to me, is going to be the biggest one. Just question marks, just kind of see how good this team actually is. How does Aaron Rodgers bounce back? Other than that, though, the 3 teams before that, I think are legitimate Super Bowl contenders for this year. So they're going to get a quick test very quickly on. They'll probably be throwing the ball a lot because I'm going to guess that they're going to need to keep up, in my opinion. But going to have a bye, and then Detroit and Los Angeles. Honestly, actually continuing that kind of gauntlet of teams that they're going to be that can score a lot.
Yeah, and that for me. So, like you said, the Giants, they should beat the Giants. It's a little bit of a coin flip game, but we'll see. And then, I have them 1-4 in that first column. Those 4 other teams, like you said, are true playoff teams and Super Bowl contenders. And then to start off the next column, Detroit at LA on Thursday on a short week as well. I don't think favors them. Indiana, Jacksonville, Tennessee, Chicago. That's an easier 4-game stretch, although I still think Indiana could be good. They had a decent defense last year. Jacksonville, if they can be what they were in 2022, at the end of 2022, I think that is a very formidable team. Chicago is really good. Tennessee, not so sure of as well. So getting more into coin flip games, but I'm still even like talking about it, not ready to be like, okay, the Vikings are going to win that game.
Yeah. No, I'm with you on there, especially the 2 on the road. It's still just going to be tough because if things pan out for Indianapolis, they have a very solid team. Jacksonville, they can stay healthy. They have a very solid team. Tennessee as well, like the similar, I would say, projection to kind of Chicago as well. That's kind of one of the comparisons we made during their video. And then hosted Chicago as well. Yeah, those teams, I would say at worst or at best, they're probably like 2-point dogs. 2.5 point dogs or something like that.
Yeah.
Arizona, I think, can be good, and Atlanta, that's going to be a very interesting game for Kirk Cousins coming back. I'm actually surprised it's not a primetime game. I'm not being completely honest, but in general, yeah, it just seems like just a tough stretch, just kind of looking at that roster. But that being said, though, too, we thought the same thing last year about the Vikings, and now, of course, Kirk Cousins was there is totally different. But who knows? Like Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores, I'm impressed with them as coaches. I think that they're going to come up with a game plan and going to come up with best way for their teams to succeed. They're going to pick off some of these games. If they can be around like maybe a little less than 500 through those first 11, 12 games, like if they're, how many games are they? If they're 5-6, 4-7, and they're still kind of in the heart because they then still have a couple other division games left coming up here through week 15 and 18. It's a possibility, it's a possibility.
Yeah.
I think that they could maybe fight for a wild card spot. But in those final 4 games, Chicago, Monday Night Football, it's going to be fun. At Seattle, hosting Green Bay, and then at Detroit to wrap up the season. It's just I guess, I'm looking at this schedule, like they're going to win games here, and we're going to get to a record in a second. But just looking at their schedule, there are teams that have question marks that are fringe playoff teams, but there's not too many teams I'm like, yeah, this team's not good. It's not like they do they play Carolina? I don't think they play Carolina even. Yeah,
no, because
so
they were last in the division. They played Carolina played Chicago.
It's not like they're playing Carolina. It's not like they're playing in New England. They are playing Arizona, who picked 4th, but I think Arizona is more improved. I think, especially thanks to their coaching staff as well. So it's going to be interesting on this Vikings team. I think on how they're going to navigate the season, but they are going to pull off some upsets. I think there's still enough talent there, and with their coaching philosophy of how they're going to have to play games, I think they've accepted that fact, and they're all for it. And I'm all for watching it too. It's fun to see them blitz all the time.
Yeah, the biggest thing for me with the schedule, and then we can move on to our record predictions, is there just never seems to be a break. Like they have the Giants and then 4 straight really tough matchups. And then coming out of their bye, they still have to play Detroit and then the Rams on a short week. Like they have 2 games in like 5 days, coming out of their bye, which isn't good. And then Indiana, like, okay, you have Indiana at home, but then like they get into the mediocre teams, and then they have 3 straight road games, which can be exhausting for teams. And then Arizona, Atlanta, both of which should be much improved teams as well. And so like that to me is just where they just kind of got the short end of the stick. And leading into my prediction here, I have them going 5-12. I like some of the players that they have. I think the JJ McCarthy move could pay dividends in the long haul. This channel, I think as a whole, was probably a little bit higher on JJ McCarthy than like the consensus. But I just struggle to really envision them going on. Like this team was destined for a top 5 pick last year. And then all of a sudden, week 6 through 10, they got this stretch of mediocre teams that, like, at just the right time, like Chicago, they got when they still hadn't figured things out. San Francisco, they got the week after the Browns game when Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel and Trent Williams all got hurt. Then Green Bay, they got right before they figured it out. Atlanta and New Orleans were just mediocre teams last year with poor quarterback play for the most part. And that's why they were really able to take advantage and win there. So like they're not going to go on that 5-game win streak in the middle of the year to get to 7 wins, in my opinion.
Yeah,
because that's just not going to exist. And so I look at this and I just think it's going to be a rough year, I think, for Vikings fans.
It's possible, and maybe I was being a little bit more optimistic with the team, but I still think you still have a great receiving room, and you still have TJ Hawkinson. I think that adding Aaron Jones, I think it's going to help add a little bit layer to the running back game, and even to the passing game as well, just with his ability to catch the ball out of the backfield. I think the defense, I think they got a little bit weaker stats wise, I would say, on defense, but I think still that Brian Flores philosophy and that blitz percentage is going to be about 50%, and so I think that's going to help them out a lot. I think they're going to get their wins earlier on in the season, but then I think as the good teams start to get their stuff together, they're just going to be able to figure out how to beat this Vikings team. Like I can see them maybe even pulling off like an early season upset against San Francisco, Houston, Green Bay. I'll be completely honest too. Those games in London, anything can happen, just because of the travel and the jet lag and everything. So I'm not saying like it's possible that they're even worse than 5-12. It's possible, even though less likely, that they're better than 7-10. I think 7-10. I think if they had a 7-10 season here, considering everything that's happened to them in the offseason, I think that they will gladly take that season, especially too if JJ McCarthy goes 7-10. If he starts all 17 games and starts to build that chemistry, because I still think too there's going to be games where Justin Jefferson just has a great matchup and they're able to scheme him open. Then you're still going to have great guys like T.J. Hawkinson, Jordan Addison. I think I've already probably mentioned this already, but I still think that there's enough there that they're going to be able to win the game because it is a 53-man roster. It's not just one guy. Now the quarterback's the most important position, but I still think there's going to be games where they can go and figure out and finagle and kind of just manufacture some victories.
Yeah. And I wasn't, when I said I don't see how they get to 7 wins, I was comparing that to how they got to 7 wins.
Felt like it was a personal attack. Personally insulting me.
Yeah. No, I do that off camera.
Yes, you do.
It goes both ways.
No, but
nice. Yeah. But for me, I think like they had a good 5-game stretch last year, and I just don't know if I can see that happening again. But I do think like you could convince me that they get to 8-9, or like maybe in a world like I think if they get lucky and play some injured teams in the middle of the year, or like let's say like Aaron Rodgers gets hurt again, that Jets game I think comes back to a coin flip game, and like there are scenarios where I could see them winning. It's just like at the start of the year looking forward, I don't necessarily see the path for them, and I think they're probably picking pretty high. So
yeah, I think they're probably going to be picking pretty high as well. I think I still think 7-10 is borderline top 10, maybe just outside top 10. We'll have to kind of wait to see. It's a long season, and I think there's going to be some opportunity for them to pick off games at the beginning and end of the season. I think that middle section then there's a couple of games in there that maybe they can pick off. But you're right, the three straight road games is going to be a lot. So I have to kind of wait and see. It's going to be very fascinating to see the Vikings go on and pick and just kind of go on and play, and then kind of where they're going to end up picking next year.
Yeah, no, I agree. So let's go ahead and wrap up this video here. If you guys have not already, please go ahead and like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below on what you thought of the Minnesota Vikings 2024 offseason. Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you have done differently? And on that, we will see you guys next time.